My name is Habiba, and I am 27 years old. I was born into a life most people dream about, but few understand. I am the daughter of a powerful Saudi minister, raised behind guarded gates, marble walls, and strict silence. From the outside, my life looked blessed, protected, honored. People bowed their heads when my father spoke. Doors opened before we reached them. But inside those walls, I learned very early that privilege does not mean freedom. I was raised Muslim from birth, taught to recite before I could understand, taught to obey before I could question. Faith was not explained to me, it was enforced. Prayer was routine, not relationship. Obedience was survival. As a girl, I learned that my voice was dangerous, my curiosity sinful, my emotions a weakness. I wore modesty like armor and silence like obedience. I memorized verses about submission, fear of hell, and punishment for disobedience, but no one ever taught me how to love God, only how to fear Him. I lived surrounded by people, servants, guards, relatives, yet I was deeply alone. At night, I would sit on my prayer mat long after the house fell quiet, staring at the floor, whispering words that felt empty in my mouth. I begged Allah to let me feel peace, to let me feel close, but all I felt was watched, observed, judged. I never felt known. Questions burned inside me like a quiet fire. Why did God feel so distant? Why did obedience never bring peace? Why did faith feel like a cage instead of refuge? But questions were forbidden. Doubt was rebellion, and rebellion in a daughter like me meant shame not only on myself, but on generations before me. So I learned to smile. I learned to nod. I learned to disappear inside myself. I became very good at performing faith while starving spiritually. Every decision in my life was made for me, every future planned without my voice. Marriage was discussed like a transaction. Honor was heavier than love, and still, something inside me longed for truth, not tradition. I did not know how to name that hunger, only that it would not leave me. If you are listening to my voice right now, maybe in secret, maybe with fear, maybe with questions you have never dared to speak, I want you to know something before I continue. You are not alone. Stories like mine exist because silence is how darkness survives. If this testimony reaches you, I ask you gently to support it, to like it, to share it, to comment if you can, so others hiding like I was can find hope. My silence began in privilege, but it nearly destroyed me, and this is where my story truly begins. The night my faith cracked did not arrive with shouting or fire. It came quietly, wrapped in authority and religious language, which made it more terrifying. I witnessed injustice committed in the name of Allah, not by strangers, but within my own family circle. A young female relative was accused of dishonoring us. No proof was offered, only suspicion and rumor. Men spoke for her while she was forced into silence. Verses were quoted calmly, voices steady, faces righteous. Mercy was never mentioned. I stood frozen in the hallway as her crying leaked through closed doors. No one intervened. No one questioned. Fear ruled that house more powerfully than love ever had. In that moment, something inside me fractured. I remembered sermons where imams warned that women were temptation, that obedience erased sin, that suffering purified faith. I remembered being taught that doubt was the whisper of Shaitan, that questioning authority was questioning God himself. But standing there, hearing her sobs, doubt felt human, not evil. I retreated to my room and locked the door, pressing my back against it as if it could protect me. I slid down to the floor and covered my mouth to silence my own tears. My heart pounded with a realization I was afraid to complete. If Allah was just, why did injustice flourish so easily? If Islam was truth, why did truth need fear to survive? That night I replayed memories from childhood, moments when I had been corrected for asking why, moments when verses were used to end conversations instead of open them. I saw how faith had been shaped into a weapon, how honor was valued above compassion. For the first time, I allowed a forbidden thought to finish forming in my mind. What if my faith was built on fear instead of love? That question felt more dangerous than hell itself. I lay awake until dawn, my prayer beads untouched, my lips unable to recite words that suddenly felt hollow. Something had shifted. I was still Muslim by name, still obedient by appearance, but inside, trust had been broken. I realized I did not feel closer to God when I submitted, only smaller. The crack in my faith was invisible to everyone else, but it spread through me like a fracture through glass. I did not know what waited on the other side of that crack, only that pretending it did not exist was no longer possible. I carried that fracture into every prayer, every greeting, every obedient nod. My body continued the rituals, but my soul stepped back, watching from a distance. Fear remained, but certainty was gone. I began to notice how quickly faith turned into force, how easily God's name was used to silence pain. The night ended, but the question did not. It followed me through daylight corridors and family gatherings, through polite smiles and controlled laughter. I understood then that once fear replaces love, belief becomes a prison. That realization did not free me yet, but it made freedom imaginable, and imagination is dangerous in a world built on control. I did not know it then, but that crack would soon become a doorway I could never close again. Once opened, truth does not politely wait to be ignored or forgotten inside a fearful heart. Curiosity became my quiet rebellion. It did not shout. It whispered late at night when the house slept, and even the guards outside seemed distant. I hid a small phone beneath my mattress, wrapped in cloth like a secret sin. My hands shook every time I touched it. I knew discovery would mean punishment, maybe worse. Yet something stronger than fear pulled me forward. I searched questions I was never allowed to ask. Why does the Quran speak of Jesus with honor? Why is Isa called the Word of God? Why do Christians speak of love instead of fear? Each search felt like crossing a border inside my soul. I deleted histories obsessively, my heart racing at every sound. One night I downloaded a Bible application. My breath caught as the screen loaded. I stared at it for several seconds before deleting it again. Minutes later, I reinstalled it, then deleted it, then installed it once more. I felt hunted even alone. I remembered imams warning us that Christianity was deception, that the Bible was corrupted, that those who read it invited darkness. Still, my finger tapped the screen and the words appeared. I opened the Gospel of Matthew. The language was simple, gentle, nothing like the harsh warnings I expected. Then I read the words of Jesus saying, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest. That word pierced me. I had been obedient, modest, disciplined, yet never rested. Tears filled my eyes as I read on. Jesus spoke to the broken, the rejected, the women, the sinners. He did not threaten them into obedience. He invited them into love. I closed the app suddenly, terrified by how deeply it moved me. I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered, Astaghfirullah, begging forgiveness for reading what I was told was forbidden. But guilt could not erase the warmth spreading through me. Flashbacks returned of sermons where fear was praised as faith, where hellfire was described in detail, where women were warned their bodies led men astray. None of that sounded like the voice I had just read. Night after night I returned to those words, always hiding, always afraid, yet more alive than I had ever felt in prayer. My curiosity became hunger. My hunger became longing. I knew I was standing at the edge of something dangerous. I was no longer searching to disprove Christianity. I was searching to understand truth. One night, after closing the app with shaking hands, I knelt beside my bed, not on a prayer mat, not facing Mecca. I spoke quietly into the darkness, my voice barely audible even to myself. God, if you are real, if you truly see me, show me who you are. I did not know who I was speaking to anymore. I only knew I could not turn back. Something had awakened inside me, and silence no longer felt like safety. Fear no longer protected me. It only delayed the truth I was already reaching for with trembling faith and desperate hope. I sensed my life was shifting beyond control, and whatever answered that prayer would change everything forever, whether it led to freedom or destruction. I could no longer stop walking forward, even if fear screamed for retreat. He came to me in a dream the same night I prayed that dangerous prayer. Sleep took me suddenly, heavy and deep, and I found myself standing in a place I had never seen before. There were no walls, no ceiling, only light, soft and endless, wrapping around me like warmth after years of cold. I was not afraid. For the first time in my life, fear was absent. Then I saw him. A man dressed in white walked toward me, not rushing, not distant, every step filled with calm authority. His face was gentle yet powerful, eyes deep with compassion I had never known. I wanted to look away, but I could not. He looked at me as if he had always known me, as if every secret thought and silent tear was familiar to him. He spoke my name, Habiba, and when he did, my knees gave way. No one had ever spoken my name with such tenderness. You are mine, he said, and his voice carried peace that settled into my chest like breath after drowning. I wept uncontrollably, not from fear, but from relief, from being seen without judgment. I tried to speak, but no words came, only tears, and he knelt before me, lifting my face gently. I felt love that did not demand, love that did not threaten, love that did not require me to disappear. In that moment, I understood without explanation that this was Jesus. No imam had told me this. No book had argued it. My spirit knew him. Light surrounded us, and I felt completely clean, as if years of shame were washing away. When I woke, my body was shaking, my pillow soaked with tears, my heart pounding as if it had been reborn. I sat upright in my bed, whispering his name, Jesus, over and over, afraid the feeling would vanish, but it did not. Peace remained, joy remained, love remained. I knew then that God was not distant. He had come to me. I also knew the truth I tried to avoid. Following him would cost me everything: my family, my protection, my future, my life. The weight of that realization pressed on my chest, but it did not crush the peace. For the first time, obedience felt like love, not fear. I held my chest and whispered yes, even though I did not yet understand the price. That dream marked the end of who I was and the beginning of who I could never stop being. I had met Jesus, and once he called me by name, silence was no longer possible, retreat was no longer safe, and my soul belonged to him, regardless of what the world would soon demand from me. I lay there breathing slowly, knowing nothing would ever return to normal, knowing faith had crossed from idea into encounter, from inherited rules into living truth. And even though terror waited ahead, I felt chosen, held, and unwilling to deny the one who entered my darkness and replaced it with light. I could never forget. That night became my true beginning, the moment love defeated fear inside me forever. And nothing in this world would ever silence that calling, even if my body paid the cost. It was already decided by heaven itself. I told only one person because I believed love would protect me. She was someone I trusted, someone who had once brushed my hair as a child and whispered comfort when I cried. I chose my words carefully, my voice shaking as I said the name Jesus for the first time aloud. I expected confusion, maybe concern, maybe silence. Instead, her face hardened in a way I had never seen. She did not ask why. She did not ask what I felt. She stood up slowly and told me I had made a terrible mistake. Within hours, my secret was no longer mine. Doors closed. My phone disappeared. My movements were watched. The warmth in my home turned cold overnight. My father called me into his office, his voice calm but deadly controlled. He told me I had embarrassed him, endangered our family name, dishonored generations. He said this was not belief, it was betrayal. I tried to explain that I had found peace, that I had found love, but he cut me off. Love does not matter, he said, only obedience. Memories flooded back of him lifting me onto his shoulders as a child, of laughter, of pride in his eyes. That man was gone. In his place stood authority without mercy. Religious leaders were brought in. Verses were recited over me like chains. They told me I was confused, possessed, misled. I was locked inside my room, guards outside the door, windows sealed. They said it was for my protection. I knew it was a prison. At night, I pressed my forehead against the wall and whispered to Jesus, asking if I was wrong, asking if this pain meant I had misunderstood him. Each time, peace answered instead of fear. I realized then that love had turned into a death sentence. I was offered one way out: renounce Jesus publicly, repent, and everything would return to normal. My life would be restored, my safety guaranteed. I imagined myself standing before them, saying the words they demanded, surviving. But the thought made my chest tighten with grief. Denying him felt like suffocating again. I fell to my knees alone on the cold floor and whispered, I choose you. I knew what that choice meant. I knew the consequences were no longer theoretical. Yet for the first time, my decision felt truly my own. I stood up knowing I would lose everything that once defined me. I was no longer the obedient daughter of power. I was a follower of Christ in a house that could no longer tolerate my existence. The night ended without sleep. I stared into darkness, fully aware that dawn would bring confrontation, pain, and possibly death. But my heart was strangely steady. Love had claimed me, and I would not give it back, even if obedience demanded my silence forever, and blood became the final proof of where my faith truly lived inside me. They did not scream at first. They spoke softly, as if calmness would convince my soul to return to its cage. Religious men sat across from me, their expressions heavy with certainty. They asked me to repeat verses, to confess confusion, to admit deception. I listened politely, my hands folded in my lap, my heart racing but steady. When they demanded I renounce Jesus, something inside me settled instead of panicked. I said no. The room changed instantly. Calm turned to anger. Authority turned to threat. They told me I was choosing death, that apostasy demanded correction, that mercy had limits. I felt fear rise in my body, sharp and real. But beneath it was peace that did not belong to me. They quoted hellfire. I remembered love. They warned me my father's patience was gone. I whispered a prayer under my breath. Jesus, give me strength. Hands grabbed my arms. I was pulled from the chair, forced to my knees. They shouted repentance over me, demanding I repeat words I refused to speak. My mind raced through memories of childhood, of safety, of everything I was about to lose. My body trembled, but my spirit felt strangely free. I had never chosen anything in my life until now. This choice belonged to me alone. They struck me when I stayed silent. Pain exploded across my back, my shoulders, my face. I tasted blood and dust. With every blow, I felt fear try to reclaim me, but peace answered louder. I focused on Jesus, on his voice calling my name, on the promise that I was his. I prayed without sound, committing my life into his hands. My vision blurred. Time lost meaning. Voices echoed like they came from far away. I heard someone say, "This will end it." Another said, "Make her repent." I thought of the verse I had read, that perfect love casts out fear, and I understood it fully for the first time. Fear no longer ruled me. Pain did not own me. Even as my body weakened, my soul felt unbreakable. I knew they could harm me, but they could not take what had already been given to Christ. Darkness pressed in, my breath shallow, my body failing. I whispered one final prayer inside my heart. Jesus, receive me. The world narrowed to sound, then silence, then something beyond pain. I did not know if I would wake again. I only knew I had not denied him. The last thing I felt before everything faded was peace, deeper than terror, stronger than death. A peace that told me this suffering was not the end, only the doorway, and that my choice had already been accepted in heaven even as my body collapsed under the weight of obedience demanded by men who could never touch what God had claimed forever. I did not wake to darkness. I woke to light that felt alive, light that did not blind but embraced, wrapping around me like arms I had always needed. There was no pain, no fear, no weight in my chest. I realized my body was no longer something I was carrying, and that understanding did not frighten me. It freed me. I felt myself lifted, not upward through space, but inward into peace. Jesus stood before me again, the same presence from my dream, yet clearer, stronger, undeniable. His eyes held no sorrow, only joy, as if he had been waiting for me to arrive. I understood then that death had not taken me from him, it had delivered me to him. I felt rest deeper than sleep, safety deeper than walls or guards or power. Every wound, every humiliation, every moment of fear dissolved like mist. I was whole. I was home. I knew without words that what happened to my body was not defeat. It was not punishment. It was the cost of truth colliding with fear. The world had tried to erase me, but heaven received me openly. I felt his presence surround me, not as judgment, but as belonging. No one demanded obedience. No one questioned my worth. I was not a daughter of power here, not an apostate, not a problem to be solved. I was simply his. Time did not exist the way it does on earth. Memories came without pain. I saw my younger self on a prayer mat, begging for peace. I saw my fear, my hunger, my questions. None of it was wasted. Every tear had been seen. Every whispered prayer had been heard. I realized something important then. They could destroy my body, but they could never touch what Jesus had already claimed. Faith was never meant to protect flesh. It was meant to save the soul. My death was not silence. It was a testimony written beyond walls and titles and threats. I felt joy rise inside me, not happiness based on circumstance, but joy rooted in truth. I understood why he had said I was his. Ownership here was not control, it was covenant. Love did not cage me, it freed me completely. I wanted to speak, to tell others who were still hiding, still afraid, still obeying out of terror, that death was not the worst thing. Living without truth was. I sensed my story moving beyond my life, spreading quietly where it was needed most, into secret hearts, into dark rooms, into whispered prayers. This testimony was never about how I died. It was about why I lived, and why fear could not hold me once love had spoken my name. I rested in that knowing, at peace, unafraid, free forever in the presence of the one who found me in silence and carried me into eternal light where no power on earth could ever reach me again. The truth did not explode loudly, it spread quietly. Slipping through cracks power could not seal. My name was not announced, but whispered. Messages passed hand to hand, screenshots saved, questions asked in hushed tones. People wondered why a minister's daughter disappeared, why explanations changed, why silence followed. Fear tried to bury the story, but fear cannot outrun truth forever. Believers online began to pray, to connect pieces, to speak carefully yet boldly. My family's influence controlled headlines, but it could not control hearts. I watched from a place of peace as lies weakened under their own weight. Islam had taught fear as protection, obedience as safety, silence as virtue. But love was exposing what fear had hidden. I saw Muslims late at night watching testimonies like mine, lowering volume, locking doors, searching with trembling hands. I understood them because I had been them. I knew the cost they counted, the danger they measured, the families they feared losing. I wanted to tell them that fear lies about safety. Fear promises survival but steals life. Truth does the opposite. It risks everything yet gives everything back. There was no revenge in what unfolded, no anger burning in me, only clarity. Power that depends on fear eventually collapses under truth. I saw religious authority scramble to explain what could not be erased. Apostasy was condemned loudly, yet curiosity kept growing quietly. The more they threatened, the more questions multiplied. Heaven does not need microphones to speak. My story traveled where sermons could not go, into bedrooms, phones, and secret prayers. I leaned close to those watching and spoke to them in their fear. I know what it costs to question. I know the weight of obedience demanded by love withheld. I know the loneliness of searching God in silence. Choosing truth may cost you safety, but it will give you freedom no prison can touch. I was silenced by force, yet my testimony speaks louder than fear ever could. Lies survive in darkness, but even a small light exposes them completely. You are not wicked for questioning. You are not lost for longing. Christ does not force himself. He calls. And his call is gentler than fear and stronger than death. I speak now to mothers, sons, daughters, scholars, and doubters, hiding behind curtains of respectability and terror. I know the calculations you make, the exits you plan, the verses you repeat to quiet your heart. I know the cost of being seen, but I also know the greater cost of remaining unseen forever. Faith built on fear fractures the soul slowly. Love heals quickly and completely. Jesus did not wait for my permission or my courage. He met me where I was trapped and led me out through truth. If you feel the pull, do not crush it. If you feel the question, do not curse it. Light will find you even in locked rooms, and when it does, fear will finally lose its authority. This is not rebellion, but awakening, not hatred, but honesty, not destruction, but deliverance offered freely to those brave enough to listen. Your life matters more than control, and truth will meet you where fear once ruled completely. Choose carefully, but do not choose silence. Silence feeds fear and starves truth inside hearts. Everywhere. Now. I am free now, freer than I ever was behind gates, titles, or protection built on fear. Freedom did not come from surviving but from surrendering to truth. Jesus was worth everything they took and more than anything they promised. I did not lose my life. I gained it. I speak to you now not as a victim, but as a witness, as someone who found love where fear ruled and light where silence was enforced. If you are watching this and something inside you is stirring, do not ignore it. That stirring is not weakness, it is awakening. I know the fear that grips your chest when questions rise. I know the calculation you make between safety and truth. I made it too. I know what it means to love your family and still walk away from lies. I know the terror of imagining life without protection, without approval, without identity, handed to you by tradition. But I also know the peace that comes when your soul finally breathes. Jesus does not promise an easy road. He promises himself. He promises presence when everyone else leaves. He promises peace that does not depend on circumstance. He promises life that death cannot steal. I was taught that leaving Islam meant losing everything. No one told me that staying meant losing myself. When Jesus called me by name, he did not erase my past, he redeemed it. Every tear became meaningful. Every prayer became answered. Every question became a doorway instead of a curse. If you are hiding your faith, hiding your doubts, hiding your hunger for truth, know this: you are seen. Christ sees you where you are. He meets you in locked rooms and whispered prayers. You do not need permission to seek him. You do not need courage you do not yet have. You only need honesty. Say the prayer I once whispered in fear: God, if you are real, show me who you are. He will answer. Maybe not the way you expect, but always in love. My story did not end in violence. It began in eternity. What they intended to erase became a testimony they could not silence. You may think your voice is small, your faith fragile, your situation impossible. I promise you it is not. Truth has a way of traveling beyond walls, beyond threats, beyond graves. If my life and death serve any purpose, let it be this: choose truth over safety. Choose love over fear. Choose Christ over silence. Share this testimony if you can. Let it reach someone who is still alone. Let it light a path where darkness has ruled too long. I am free forever, and I am calling you home. Not to religion, not to rebellion, but to Jesus, who knows your name, who carries your fear, and who waits patiently for your yes. Wherever you are, whatever it costs, He is worth it, always.